Hey Zaka family! Zaka is launching an exclusive membership platform to provide you with career development workshops, coaching, community, and so much more. Go to ZakaConnect.com and sign up to receive information on how to access early registration and perks. Hello, everybody. This is Paul Herman, the Prince of Motivation and host of Zaka Presents My Journey. We're creating this vulnerable and positive platform where you can get inspired and motivated from different leaders from our community. Today, our guest is Shahira Qudrat, who is the Director of HR and Strategy and Planning at the University of Denver and a professional development coach for the multicultural individuals. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. Hello. So nice to be here with you.
Pleasure's all ours. I just want to let you know that title right there had me for a second. It had me for a second. That's a very long title, but I know when you have a very long title, that means you have a very beautiful journey that you're going to be sharing with us this evening.
Thank you. Yes, it's been a journey. That's definitely the definition of the career path. It's always a journey.
And I know our listeners are going to be listening for that information right there. But before we get into your journey and talk about where you are currently and all the things that you're doing, if possible, to share with our listeners right now a little bit more about your cultural background and where you grew up.
Absolutely. So the audience that I speak to is what I call the 1.5 generation Americans. So someone who relates to both first generation immigrants who come here to the country, but also those who were born here of those parent immigrants. And so, we look at the stories of ourselves and people who come from other countries. And, I honestly believe our stories don't start with us. It doesn't start with just us. It starts with our parents, their journeys. And they make it our own as well. So, we come from cultures, especially me, I come from Afghanistan, or my family comes from Afghanistan. Our culture is very collectivist. And so we come from a collectivist culture. And here we are in America as an individualistic culture and looking at the mindsets of, what creates a human being here as an American, what makes us not American, or what makes us both, neither. And
True.
that's what I see as like the East and West perspectives. And I think that's all of us. That's all of us who were, at least first and second generation Americans here in the country. We all have that similar sort of background.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what does the Afghan culture mean to you?
So the Afghan culture for me is a way of life. It's a way of life that my parents taught me. It's a part of my identity. So when people ask me, where are you from? I tell them Afghanistan. Or if they ask me, about my identity, I answer that I'm Afghan-American. But you notice how we always use our root culture first. We don't say we're American Afghan. We say we're Afghan American. And basically, for me, that's the blueprint. This is my blueprint for my tongue or language that I speak. The Dari that we speak at home, the foods we eat, the roles and responsibilities, right, that are expected of us in our place, in our family, the customs, the holidays. So that's what it means to me to be Afghan or to be Afghan American.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I do like how you brought that up. I like how, sometimes people say I'm American, Puerto Rican, American,
Right.
Jamaican, but putting that first, you're like, that's like your stamp.
Right. Exactly.
And no matter how far you are from where you originated from, your family originated from, you guys put that first, which is unique, and it's special as well too.
Yeah, and it's varying layers. I think we sometimes forget that, people who don't necessarily relate to what I call the white Anglo-Saxon Presbyterian American identity, which is, what we call, the white American experience, you come from an intersection. That means, my lived experience is never going to be other than a woman who's also Afghan, who's also American. So I think that that's really important to recognize that we all come from different intersections, especially if we come from varying cultures, outside of the US, it becomes a part of who we are, and it should be the fabric of who we are. And I think how we decide to embrace that or, agree with that, disagree with that, makes us who we are in our lived experience.
And when now talking about your childhood, we kind of tap on that right there. Like, how was your childhood? Well, like, what were some like the difficulties that you had to navigate through? And also like the the things that you had to face in regards to like your cultural background and like also your faith.
So I was lucky. I had a very great childhood. I'm very fortunate. Both of my parents were around when I was growing up, and they were both very loving to us. My mom was a bit unconventional because she, as an Afghan woman, I think everyone expects, especially first generation Americans, that they should be at home taking care of the family. But she wasn't. She was the steady 9-to-5er in our family. And my dad was the one who was more entrepreneurial. So he was always out and about working evening shifts because they had an agreement early on that one of them would stay home with us. And I think that has a lot to do with keeping the culture, keeping the tongue, or making sure that we, what I call stayed on the lines of being, Afghan. So, he had a huge impact on me as a kid, my father, because what he said was law. Right. Even if we didn't believe it, but in our house, what he said was the way we sort of, the rules that we followed. So, what that does naturally, I think, especially when you're growing into a young adult, is it creates a dual identity or sort of cognitive dissonance, right? We have an identity that we have for the person we are at home with our families, and then we have an identity of who we are outside of the home, maybe in school or with our friends. And so, what happened in my journey in growing into a young adult is I very much developed dual identities. And dual identities meant like secret language, secret school outfits, secret personas, secret relationships that never intersected with the person we were at home. So that was quite the journey, having to learn to navigate both, but not necessarily allow them to intermingle.
That double life.
Absolutely.
I think I lived a double life at one point when I'm living in the Bronx. It was in the 90s. It was very big to wear baggy clothes. So I remember going to Catholic school, and I would leave out of my house, and in my book bag would be a pair of baggy jeans or something like that, and I would switch out real quick, just because I wanted to live that lifestyle. I was like, all right, I gotta do this. I gotta do it. It's the 90s, So
Exactly.
I didn't live a double lifestyle like that, but there was a little bit of that going on. A little bit of that.
Absolutely. There had to be.
Can you talk to us a little bit more about like your educational journey? Like, where'd you study and why?
Yeah, so my educational journey, I never stopped learning. I always talk about being a lifelong learner, which is big for me. I have been a student most of my life. I will admit that I'm currently in a program right now trying to certify in strategy and innovation in organizational culture. So for me, my educational journey is ongoing. I don't think it'll ever stop necessarily. But my aspirations, I think, to speak more broadly, like as a child, what I wanted to do, I wasn't the type of person that was like, okay, I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be an engineer, or I'm going to grow up and I'm going to be a doctor. I just knew that I wanted to work with people, immerse myself in different cultures, get to know others. And I didn't necessarily have a title behind that or an educational journey or thought process for school necessarily. I think one of the challenges, though, was that I was married at a young age, probably right out of high school. I was engaged and married, and had a child by the time I was 20 years old. So I didn't necessarily go down the conventional path of going to a 4-year school. And what I thought for me at the time, because both of my parents are basically doing business ventures, is that I would just continue to work towards my MBA, and I did that. It took me 12 years to get to that, so not the typical 4 to 6 year path. But again,
but you got it.
I got it. That's
come on
sure.
now, put the stamp on that.
Right, absolutely. So
now, with the I know you said your academic background. You have you have the MBA, and you also have an MA in global community engagement.
That's right.
That's like a lot going on over there. A lot. But I like that you said, like you said, you're a student, and that's a very important thing. And I think that's a very important gem that you're dropping to our listeners. Letting them know that you always have to be a student of life, right? You can't just be like, what I learned is what I learned, and I'm going to apply it, and that's it, right? There's always more room for growth, and when it comes to learning, how does your educational how has your educational background like kind of shape your leadership style and your approach to like fostering diversity within and inclusion for individuals?
So my education, my love is my MA in global community engagement. That's really where my heart is, and I actually obtained that not too long ago, a couple years ago, through the University of Denver. It's one of the benefits of working in higher ed. But basically, an MBA serves you well. An MBA, I believe, is truly a very versatile degree for those that don't necessarily know what they want to do with their life, but want some kind of well-rounded education. It gave me the business acumen, right, to understand when I was going into a room, full of, typically it was my white male leaders, how to read reports, how to read the room, understand what strategy meant, and how to implement that to make sure that I was managing up and down. So my MBA served me very well. But what I really wanted to do with my global community engagement degree was figure out how to weave in the intersection of the multicultural identity and leadership. My thesis that I did for that degree was around, the question, why multicultural women make the best leaders in multinational corporations today. Because I do believe that there are ways to, again, connect what we do in business and our identity and use them to our benefit, towards a continued global society. And as you know, the distance is lessening every day as we approach this, what they're calling the fourth generational industrial technology revolution. So, we're heading in that direction.
They calling this
They sure are.
They calling it, let's get prepared.
Yes, exactly.
Let's get prepared. Now, right. After school, right? We got you graduate. I mean, you have your degree. What were like your first 5 years after college, or matter of fact, after school? What was like the biggest lessons you learned?
So again, I'll say I don't know, because I've never stopped going to school. And so adopting a mindset to always be learning and growing has actually served me best. There's a saying, as I call it the American saying, curiosity killed the cat. But I think the curiosity made the cat happy and, live a great life, because it doesn't matter what you go to school for, what you study, but a well-rounded education or exposure to different people, different ideas, helps you learn and makes you humble. Because I realized the more I went to school, the more people I was exposed to, the more ideas I was exposed to. I realized how little I really know about the world.
True.
And who we are. So
that's always a shocking thing to catch on to. You're like, I thought I knew it all. No. There's always someone that knows more than you. And the world's a very big place.
Yeah.
And if you really want to touch the lives of people, why don't you want to touch the lives of people around the world with something that's very important and meaningful, such as like something that you're studying, or a movement that's out there. So, yeah. Now, being how was like your Afghan-American, Muslim American, like we're going down a whole lot of things right here.
Right.
Identity. I know you said you were going back and forth, kind of figuring out some stuff, but identity influenced you in your approach and your professional, when it comes down to your style.
So I think it's important to note that the way that our brains are created biologically is that we're built to survive. We're not built to succeed. I remember reading that somewhere, and I thought to myself, that is so true. And so when we don't know what our identity is, or who we are, or what contributions we bring to our society, that isn't created for us. This society, especially in the United States, it's not created for those who sort of fall outside the typical path or traditional path of a white male. It's not built for us. But the direction we're going in, whether it's corporations or globally, you can see, things from different angles. So when I say I'm Afghan-American or I'm Muslim American, what it does is it gives me a lens, right? There's an emphasis on a particular lens that I bring, whether that's in the workplace, whether we're talking about social issues. I mean, look at our current generation, between millennials, Gen Z, or Gen Alpha, as you call them, their business needs are going to change. There's, their social responsibility is no longer a checkbox. They won't have the same identity issues that we have necessarily, but if they do, it's going to basically, create a problem for them and how they move forward in their life. And when you define what globalization looks like, it's not what they call a melting pot. We have to look at it as individuals contributing to a broader goal. But that to me is embracing diversity. That to me is embracing your identity and what creates a better landscape for the future of business. In all of that, your identity and who you are makes us the world, makes us the global operation. And if you can accept your identity and who you are, you'll be clear in what that mission is and what that vision is.
And a lot of the guests previously had said that was a very hard thing to do, when coming over here to America, trying to fit into that mold at one point, and they felt like they had to kind of lose a little bit of themselves in order to kind of fit in. But then they start to realize that their culture was actually an asset within that within their organization, within their company, and also in regards to their educational background as well. And then once they started to see that they could utilize that to kind of like use that as leverage, then they started to really like scale themselves within the business world and incorporate. So you are right. Identity is very important. It's hard sometimes to kind of keep your identity because life keeps on changing. The industry keeps on changing, but you just have to kind of stay true to yourself and having good leaders and mentors and to kind of help out with that, because I can only imagine when you already have like you're debating back and forth on who you are. Then someone comes to you and says, I need you to be this person in the office. And you're like, this is a third person I got to be. I don't even know how I'm going to do this. Juggling all that kind of stuff.
The code switch is too real and too easy for us. I tell my kids all the time, like I can go in and out of language, in and out of thought, in and out of persona. And yes, it's a great skill to have, but sometimes you're absolutely right. You might lose some of your own identity because you're so paying attention to the audience that you're speaking to or trying to, fit in. And sometimes you compromise yourself for that. Yeah. And, we can't be harsh on ourselves, but it's the reality of the world we live in. So,
and it's a learning curve. It's a learning process. You got to figure it out. Sometimes you got to go through it to actually see it, and I know that with you going through a lot of stuff, you actually have accomplished a lot. Right. And some of your accomplishments, I'm going to just like highlight a few, from writing a book, TEDx speaker, working as a director of HR at the University of Denver. Right. To top it off. You're also a development coach. Like, what strategies do you employ to like maintain your career and stay true to your mission?
So some of that is embedded within me. I would say, watching my mom grow up, she was always doing so much. She was, working, she ran the household, she took care of my sick father. My mom was basically the behind the scenes. And so some of that is probably her her influence. But I think if I were to sort of strategize, what I would say is be clear on your mission and vision in life. Like, for example, for me, for my lens and my vision, it's to help create a more equitable world for women. And why? What's my reason? What's my why? It's because women invest 90% of their earnings. This is according to the UN. I'm not making this number up, but 90% of their earnings back into their communities. So you want to build a community, you want to build inclusion, you want to create belonging. We know where to invest that money, but it's a matter of, spreading the message in a way that makes sense. 90% is as a high number, especially if we can, target funding towards women who are especially in social enterprise. And really, again, being very clear on what your mission is. And for me, that's really important. The clarity, it took me too long. And I say this all the time. It took me too long on my journey to talk about what my mission and vision is. Even though I think, our next generation, hopefully the next generation here in the United States, they're not going to have that much trouble, but we don't have to spend so much time and complicate it. So really think about, what is my journey here and what is my purpose? And the way that I've framed that is that I could invent and reinvent myself in any way that I want. through my mission and vision. So writing a book, I accomplished my vision. Doing a TED Talk, I accomplished my vision. I may be starting a business this year, next year. That I'm going to be accomplishing my mission and vision. But getting really clear on what your why is a critical component of moving forward in your life. So
Do you feel now that you mentioned these things, you said opening your own business and your TED Talk, and do you feel like when you find your why, it's become easy to kind of transition from one thing to the next?
Absolutely. And sometimes, my sister will say, because we have this conversation all the time, she's like, why are you doing so many things all the time? So I tell her, I'm not doing so many things all the time. I'm actually doing exactly what I want to do to accomplish my mission and vision. So whether it's having this conversation with you, or getting up on the stage to talk about a topic or coaching someone one-on-one, as long as my vision is clear, it doesn't, they say this, it doesn't necessarily feel like work because it's a part of who you are.
True.
And you look at it from a different lens, from a different perspective when you're actually, allowing yourself to be used in that way, to be used as a vision and mission and part of a broader, focus rather than just individualistic thinking. That's what the collectivist cultures teach us. That's the best part of the collective culture. Think about your community, not just yourself. And that should be a part of what we do if we want to contribute in this global society.
And when it comes down to accomplishments, when I gave you a few of those, talked about those, the University of Denver, right? I want to kind of tap on that right now.
Sure.
I want to know, like, what is your current role, and like, what do you actually do there? With all the things that I'm hearing, I'm trying to see now, like, how are you kind of like bringing this all together at the University of Denver?
Sure. So my role at University of Denver is currently director of strategy and planning for human resources and inclusive community. So that's the actual division that I work in within higher ed. My role is to basically work with all of the directors. So we have a director of people development, for example, talent and acquisition, benefits. We have HR partners. So, any HR organization that's looked at from a strategic lens has to plan against what the mission and vision of University of Denver is. I've been a huge fan of University of Denver, especially since the last two components of our HR group are inclusive community. So that always strikes a chord with me. University of Denver has a past. They have history where they don't necessarily connect with minority communities. And so a lot of work that they do right now is trying to figure out what belonging is. We have a group called Community and Values that lives underneath the umbrella of HR. And so, we work on how can we create belonging, right, in a place that wasn't necessarily designed maybe initially for belonging. So for me, it's about the looking at what the broader university goals are. And we know higher ed is in a struggling industry right now. Yeah. What the goals of the university are and actually tracking them back to our own goals, and how can we as a division in a unified way work towards a plan that will get us to what the goals of the institution are. So my role in that is to actually work with the directors, work with my my fellow directors to figure out what that path is, turn it into an actual plan that has tasks, steps, and an implementation timeline, and we work towards that on a daily basis. So it's almost like being able to look at at the view of the plan from 500 feet and also from the ground, and being able to see which direction that the group is going in. So that's my role. Bring great people to the University of Denver, make it a great experience, and how do we do that cohesively as a team?
Something I kind of caught on to is like when you said like bringing people together, right? That is a very big important thing in what we're doing here at Zaka. Bringing communities together and hearing stories like this, and to see now you're in the University of Denver, doing the same thing. There's people around the world,
right,
who are beacons of light to help bring people together, right? So the University of Denver must be very lucky and very pleased to have you a part of their team, and know that someone like yourself that takes it very serious this mission. And since it's a part of you, it's even better to have someone sitting at that place of leadership that already has that mission inside of them, versus like, hey, look, we just need someone who looks like they could fit the role. Come sit at the table with us and make this happen, because we just want to make this work. We want to make people see someone else besides us there. But to have someone that already believes in something like that sitting there in that leadership position, it helps now to kind of make sure that the program that you guys are running and the things that you're doing is a lot more valid. Because, at times, some people just kind of brush it over. They're like, all right, look, we're just going to do this 1 or 2 events a year and we're good. We hit quota, right? No. It's a lifestyle. It's meaningful. It's not just celebrated once a week or once a month. It means something, because when you highlight someone's culture, you make them special, which in turn makes them possibly want to work harder for you, because they feel valid. They feel appreciated and accepted. And that's what a lot of people just want in life, just to be accepted. So congratulations to you over there for doing that, because that's got to be I can imagine the student body, like it's a large group of students. You got to be juggling through. But hey, look, and on top of that, you got this memoir, right? Let's talk about that, right? You got the University of Denver, you got all this TED Talk stuff going on, and you got your memoir as well. So we talk a little bit more about that, and like some of the topics that you touched on, like immigration, feminism, religion, right? Discrimination. These are big words, right? And how have these words kind of like shape your career trajectory?
It's interesting. I was actually laid off from a big corporation before I wrote the book. And, that can be a big challenge for some people, right? Getting laid off is a part of, I think, a career experience that people don't often forget. And I remember going through the experience thinking to myself, how am I going to let this define me? And I went back into my goals and again, back to my vision, what it is that I wanted to accomplish. And I decided that instead of trying to use that time to decide what my next career move was, I was going to actually sit down and reflect on, my purpose, because this gives me a chance again to reinvent myself. So, going through that experience of, okay, I've gone through a layoff. What am I going to do next? I actually don't know what I'm going to do next, but here's an experience of sitting down and reflecting on your experiences from what you can remember, right? Our histories, our parents' histories, up to the life that we had lived in that moment. And I realized that all these different issues, you talked about it a little bit, like feminism, sexism, racism, being a Muslim in this country, especially during the time, of our last presidency, it brought so much to the surface that I felt like as a Muslim woman, as an Afghan woman in my identity in that moment, that it was the right time to write this book. And it was a very cathartic experience for me. I didn't write this book necessarily as a business venture, but more for leaving a message out there for women about what it's really like to be someone with a dual identity. How do you navigate? What does it mean to be in the middle when we say, all right, this is who you are as a person. This is who you are as an American. People were, in 2018, 2019, questioning their, what I call Americanness. Was I American enough to be here? And so it really, it was a great challenge.
Right there.
Imposter syndrome. I think, almost seeing it as a challenge. Like, if this is what I believe about my identity, right? We always say we want better things for ourselves. We want to be patient. We want to be, more giving. We want to, be kind. These are all things that, qualities and skills that we aspire to. But when the moment hits, what are those opportunities that actually teach us those things? So it was really, again, a moment, or it gave me a moment to sit down and reflect on what those things meant for me, and give me the conviction that I needed to make the decisions, and talk and hopefully help other women in the process. You don't need to be floundering so much. And if you do, it's okay. It's a part of the process. Being in the middle is where you belong sometimes. And it's not this way. It's not that way. It's your way. It's the middle path.
Mm-hmm. Now, for someone like yourself who's been, navigating, through that multicultural identity, right? Just the
Hmm. Hmm.
complexity of that. Like, could you like share like a pivotal moment in your life, maybe even within your career, where like it kind of helped like shape or
Hmm.
make you understand a little bit more about your professional development, being a professional development coach for
Yeah.
multicultural individuals?
Honestly, I was actually in a role that was moving me from a managerial role to more of a senior management role. And one of the leaders that I had at the time, her name was Sarah. She's a great friend as well today. She basically brought on an executive coach to help with that sort of transition in my life. So when I talk about coaching, it's a very endearing topic for me because in some ways it saved my career and it saved my life because again, this was before I wrote my book, before I've had so many experiences, being at a job that I didn't necessarily know if I wanted to be at, trying to understand what my direction was in my career. So she had me start working with an executive coach, and I remember thinking to myself the first time he was there, and some of the questions that he asked, I was like, who is this guy? He's not even asking me about like my work. I thought I was just going to sit down and write some goals and be done with this experience because it was a checkbox, right? Oh my goodness, they're having me work with an executive coach. At first, it almost felt insulting. Like, what did I do? What do I need a coach for? But I think after you get past all the ego and you realize someone's willing to invest in you, because executive coaching costs money.
Yeah.
There's an energy exchange there. And he came into the room, and the line of questions he asked me, I think it was like 35 minutes into the first session, and I was just sobbing on the table, with this person
Mm,
that I barely knew.
mm,
And I was
mm.
like, what is this? Is this corporate coaching? What is happening to me? But it was a pivotal moment in my life because in my career, what it showed me is that I wasn't necessarily the pain and the confusion that I was experiencing in that moment. That I was beyond any career challenges I had. I was beyond any experiences I had in that moment, but that I was actually a human being going through multiple layers of challenges internally, mentally, emotionally, socially, and that there was a validation in my story. And so for me to do professional coaching, for me it feels more like, this is where we're at. We need to have relationships with people to understand what direction they want to go in. And in order to have a relationship, you need to invest time with someone to understand who they are, what their stories are. And for me, that's the experience. I gain just as much from my coaching as my clients do, because it's about an energy exchange. And I feel like it doesn't matter what roles I've been in any of my career life, I've always been somebody's development coach. Whether it was just teaching them the thing that was one step beyond where they were at in the moment. It was about being able to step back, and like I said, it benefited me a lot in the moment that I needed it most for my career. And so for me, it was just it's a way of giving back. Like, how do we give back to our individuals who need some of that, movement? They need that momentum from, this particular phase in their life to move into the
True.
next particular phase, career life, personal life, professional life. So.
And when it comes down to like your TED Talk, I know you're
Hmm.
hosting that as well, right? First off, you just want to say you juggle a lot, like your sister was talking about, but you do a
Hmm.
really good job of juggling it, right? It's obviously I know that it does come with a lot of stress, right, at times, but you
Hmm.
definitely have found a happy medium in order to kind of like glue all this and gel this together in a very nice way. That
Right.
for someone like yourself would be like, "Yeah, I got this under control." But if someone else jumped in your shoes right now, they'd probably be like, "Look, I don't even know where to start." Right? But like your TED Talk, right? I know hosting. Could you talk about what type of message or story do you
Mhm.
share during your TED Talks? And how it kind of like relates back to empowering like that multicultural woman. I know you kind
Mhm.
of highlighted earlier.
Right. So my message is very clear. The world needs more multicultural women leaders. Period. In every industry, in every way, in every single aspect, whether we're talking about politics, business, social services, whatever it is, we need more multicultural women. And it is because they have this lens. And the way I sort of structured my TED Talk was 3-part. I talk about how to re-examine, redefine, and reclaim your identity. Because as I said earlier, you need to be clear in your identity, or at least understand why you are who you are, to be able to move forward from that perspective, to be able to move forward into your vision. And so I talk about, the story. What was the story that led me to this sort of, overarching, what I call the 3 R's, re-examine, redefine, and reclaiming yourself, so that you can move on with your career, move on with your aspirations, and not feel so stuck because of all of the different, if you will, different personas or identities fighting in your head. They don't need to fight. They can all exist within you. That's what makes you who you are.
100%. 100%. 100%. Now, when it comes down to like you building like an inclusive community, right? I know we talked about that at the University of Denver, but I know in life in general you're doing that. Could you talk a little bit more about like a significant breakthrough or impact within your professional career that's kind of like deals with that?
Yeah, I remember a few years ago, I actually started working with the Denver Commission for Women and Children, and I was the co-chair of their Gender Pay Equity Committee. And our role was really to be advisory to the mayor. It was Mayor Michael Hancock in Denver at the time. But what a cool experience, right? To be a part of something bigger. And what I did at that time was connect the city of Denver to University of Denver. So when we talk about inclusive communities, what we're talking about is belonging. What makes somebody inclusive? What makes an organization inclusive? And it's about how do we connect people or organizations that have like missions and visions to allow them to talk, to have some kind of forum so that they can share and exchange information. So for me, I say this like jokingly and not, but I don't think that there isn't anything that 2 people can't talk about over a meal, or to sit down and to have a conversation with each other face to face. But sometimes, what we do is we allow our differences to be embedded so deeply that we start to break apart, and we lose where those connections are between us. And so working for different organizations or bringing different organizations together for me is inclusive community. Like how do we ensure, and this is a challenging topic in higher ed, right? Because we talk about civil discourse. Right now there's so much civil discourse, even in our current day society. There's so many differing external factors that drive the way we think at work today, the different things that are happening outside of our sphere of control. But again, how do we create a community where you can have those conversations with each other, through civil discourse, and still disagree? I can disagree with you. You can disagree with me. But inclusive community means where, I'm hearing your story and you are hearing mine, and we have respect for one another in that conversation.
True.
We never lose respect for one another as human beings in that conversation. So inclusive community to me is, how do we build that? How do we build that part of that? What are the values that we bring, or what kind of values do we want to embody? So for me, that was a great outlet, through the commission, because it allowed me to see other groups, of women working on different issues. We had, a policy review committee. We had those working in health. And like I said, I was on the Gender Pay Equity Committee. But for me, it was, again, looking at, wow, look at all these different women who are working in different industries coming together to have a conversation about how to make this city better. We should be able to have that forum everywhere, at our workplace, through employee resource groups, but also in what we do in our spare time, or what we call our spare time, So
those topics do get a little heated at times, right?
Absolutely.
Especially when people are trying to share their thoughts and ideas. And obviously, if someone's like, "You're not even hearing me," right? Level of frustration really kicks in.
Absolutely.
And I remember one of the previous guests had mentioned that in like a conversation where they were talking about they're at a table as a leader talking about inclusion, and different parties were there, and they were trying to like really like come to an agreement on what was the best programs to run. And it was a lot of that frustration going back and forth. But again, you got to, like you said, respect everyone as a human being. Like, hey, look, we all have a mission. We all have a plan. Let's stick to it. And let's do what's best for our community and not what's best for ourselves.
Exactly.
And with you, TED Talk, book, University of Denver, like, this is like like Sister said, you're doing a lot, but a lot of great things, right? But you got 5 kids as well, too. Is that correct?
I do. I do have 5 kids. I tell people that all the time.
I was making sure. I knew you said I have 2. I said, hold on. I thought you had 5 now. You put 3 to the side. Okay. Yeah. So you got 5 kids. You got 5 kids. And that's a beautiful thing. First off, that is beautiful. Just being a mother is a beautiful thing, right? That's a massive job, and it's a massive role, because you take on the role of actually inspiring the people that your kids, right? And making sure you instill some of those principles and practices and the things that you're teaching to adults, right? You're teaching to the youth, right? So it's a very beautiful thing. So I'm going to kind of hop in here and say, how are you juggling all this and still striving and thriving in the things that you do?
Yeah, it's funny you talked about, talking to kids and talking to adults. Honestly, when I was raising my kids, I always thought to myself, how do I phrase this in a way that if they're an adult, like as they're children and they're adults, that they understand this? Like, how do we have this conversation when they're young and then also be able to relay the same values when they're adults? And so I always saw them as individuals. That was the one thing, right? I mean, we talk about a collectivist culture, which is wonderful. We live in, we come from these broad cultures that say community is the focus. But I think that there is an essence of individualism in the West that's embedded in society, right? Like, you as an individual are important. This is very important to me in raising my kids. Like, I love my kids. They know that I love them, and sometimes my husband will always, he's like, you're the hippie in the relationship, he tells me, because you're the one who's like, oh, everything will be fine. And he's the one who's a little bit more disciplined. He comes from a more disciplined background. But I think, like, if you love your kids, there's no right way to raise them. There's no right way to raise them. There's no right answer. My parents, they decided one of them was going to work in the daytime. One of them was going to work at night. Someone was going to always be home with us. So, I look at it no different for my children, except that, again, acknowledging them as individuals is really important. They're all so different from each other. No joke. I have, a 20-year-old daughter who's a pilot and an engineer. I have a 20-year-old son who's, who wants to do, he wants to get into computer information system, but not sure about his path yet. I have another daughter who wants to, be a drag racer. Like, you look at this and you're like, oh yeah, she wants to do drag racing.
Let's go. Does that even run in the family? Like, come on, like, that's just you took it to another place right there. Shout out to your daughter. She's like, Mom, I'm going to be so different. I'm going to have my own thing, right? I know I'm juggling just like you back in the days, but I'm going to identify myself as a drag racer right here.
It's so interesting because she came to me the other day. It was about a month ago. She was like, Mom, you do all this career coaching for everyone else. It's my turn. And I was like, okay, let's have this conversation.
This when he abused the system at home. Yep, this how they do it.
She's like, you have to treat me the way you treat me, your clients, So we went through the process, and I'm her mom, so I know what she wants to do. She has motorcycles and cars and helmets all over her room, but she doesn't know what she wants to do with her life. So we went through the process of asking questions. What do you want to do? And I think, like, as a parent, I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to be 100% honest. I'm not aligned with this. This is my daughter. She wants to be on a drag strip and race dangerously with, all these other folks. So here's my maternal instinct kicking in.
You're like, no. No.
And then, of course, she'll say, "Mom, you had a motorcycle when I was growing up," and so
Oh,
we kind of
she
go back
got
and
you.
forth. Yeah, she did. She certainly got me, but that's okay. And I think that's a part of the challenge.
Yeah.
Again, when I say I love my kids and I acknowledge them for who they are, I have to acknowledge that they are different people. Right. I call myself Afghan-American, and interestingly, so they do as well. At least my daughters do. They identify to everyone that they're Afghan-American, but they're obviously, they have a different set of influences in their lives, and so it's about, how do you make that an asset? Just like everything I mentioned, your background, your story, your skills, these are all assets that are, that can be shared if you want them to. And that's how I want to raise my kids. These are kids that human beings that'll go off into the world, and then they get to decide how they want to live their life and what contributions they want to make to the world. So it's important to me that they understand that no matter what, mom has your back. But we have to have a little bit of distance, I think, with kids when it comes to, like, your typical maternal instincts. Like, all right, next time I'm going to just refer her over to to a different
I'm gonna
career.
shut this down right now. Honey, this is gonna stop right now. Mommy has a job for you at the University of Denver.
Right, exactly. Come do
Come
something
join
safe.
mom. Come join mom. You could drive the car there. You could probably ride a motorcycle there, but that's it. That's the closest you're
Right,
gonna get to it. But
right,
she's attached to her identity. She's like, this is what I want to do,
right.
and that's a beautiful thing, And
Absolutely.
I'm a firm believer and an advocate for young adults finding that within themselves at an early age, right? And
Absolutely.
it brings me to my next question for you is like embracing like one identity, right? It's truly an asset at the end of the day for
Yeah.
yourself, for your relationships, for your line of business, or even the establishment that you're in. How do you encourage individuals to recognize and to leverage their unique cultural background?
It kind of follows the same framework that I talked about, the re-examine, redefine and reclaim. You really have to sit down and uncover the experiences that make you who you are. That's it. You can't keep running from yourself. You have to acknowledge your identity. At some point, you need to sit down and say to yourself, this is who I am. This is where I come from. What agreements you make with yourself in that moment are very important. What I would also say, especially with, those who have multiple identities or come from multicultural backgrounds, is love the middle. Learn to love the middle. I used to
Mm,
fight this a lot. Like, people would say, oh, you walk into a room and you can see all perspectives, like it was a bad thing. No, I actually became a better manager because I could see from my employee's perspective, or have a better view of my employee's perspective. So find your place in the middle and love being in the middle, because that's where you can contribute. And then, honestly, I say this because I've been doing it for so long, is create a plan on how to get there. I always tell my clients, or, if I'm doing work at the University of Denver, it's the plan. You have to look at where you want to go and work backwards from there. And I know I'm oversimplifying it, because it's not always as easy as, here are the steps you take to get to this,
sure.
particular destination. But I do think if you look at it as a part of the broader journey and start to align what you want to do, with the experiences of others who are on a similar path, this is where that mentorship comes in. This is where that coaching comes in. This is where that research comes in. If I want to be a doctor, there are certain things I have to do to become a doctor. There are certain things that I
Yep.
have to be educated about. But, creating that sort of plan, even if it's just a this is what this is how I'm going to get to my career, or this is how I'm going to learn about myself, or what career I want to do. I think a plan is very important. And then being, really having that integrity with yourself to stick to that
Mm,
plan,
mm.
to honor yourself by honoring your plan.
And as we know, the journey is long and very beautiful, and it's
Yes.
to keep that as a center is always going to be a hard thing, and it's going to be some things that kind of throw us off track. But again, if you really believe in yourself and your mission, and your God given gifts, I mean your gift that someone has
Absolutely.
given to you, right? Then you utilize that for the greater good. Now, I just want to say thank you again for your just dropping a lot of information with us today. But I really, 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 really want to tap into this one right here. I know you are going to be working with Zaka directly, and it's always an honor to meet another teammate who's going to be helping in the movement and of what we're trying to do here at Zaka in the many more years to come. So could you speak a little bit more about your partnership with Zaka and some of the workshops that you're going to be developing for our future members?
Absolutely. I was just want to say that I was so excited when I heard about Zaka, because I always thought to myself, there has to be something like LinkedIn or some kind of group that is thinking about multicultural individuals. And so I think I was on social media once and I saw one of the posts and I was like, what is this, Zaka? So I look into it and I'm just like, learning about the organization and your mission and what you stand for and who you're working with. And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, I'm so grateful an organization like this already exists, that puts immigrants and just people who are looking for a better career path in the middle. And so it was really in alignment with my own mission of trying to get more multicultural women in leadership roles. It was almost like, a very simpatico, as they say, a plan or relationship. So for me, I'm hoping to host some workshops around a few different topics. One is, taking the leap from being a manager and going into senior manager roles or director type roles and how to do that authentically. I think that's very important. Reclaiming your multinational, multi-American identity to improve your personal and professional development. We talked about that. Your identity is at the crux of who you are. And if you can get really clear on what that is, then many doors open up for you. And then the last one is really work-life flow. So I say this often, I don't believe in work-life balance. A balancing act gets exhausting. So for me, it's about flow, how to get into the work-life flow, but navigating as a multi-American parent, right? A parent and a professional at the same time, which I think, is a part of that flow. You gotta get into the flow to understand how to get through the highs and the lows of the tides that come our way. So
that was very well said. I like the balance and the flow. A lot of people are shooting for balance, but when in actuality, you definitely need the flow, right?
It's so exhausting to try to balance and stay in balance. And I've done it for so many years. And, you keep falling over and then you think you've failed. But we all know that the failures are where we learn the most. So it's not about that. It's about the flow. Let's get into the low tide.
That's right. That's right. I mean, don't run from every low tide, but don't stay there too long.
Exactly.
Let's elevate ourselves and get up out of there. Now, your mission is very big. I want to leave you with this last question right here. Your mission is very big, and I know you're going to be looking to inspire not only just the community that you have in Denver, but the world at large, right? What is some of the strategies or some of the things you can kind of share with us on this last question to kind of give us a better understanding of what are you looking to do to achieve that goal?
My biggest challenge right now is scale. So we talk about moving from small business mindset into, broader business mindset. I think my challenges have presented themselves in a way that, if my mission is to work with 1 million, women, to multi-American or multicultural women, to try to get them into leadership roles, it's about scale. It's how do we get the message across to more people at a time so that we can have more conversations. And so I think that is going to be my challenge in 2024 and beyond is, how to, is this through workplace consulting? Is this another business idea? Is this hosting more workshops? Is this, getting on the ground? That's been another part of my 2024 strategy. I think COVID-19 is a great example. It gave all of us something to think about in a world that, what is a world that is connected and what is a world that's disconnected? So getting on the ground and talking to more women and having some face-to-face conversations about what multiculturalism means, what that means for leadership, and how can we encourage more women to opt in and to look in, to starting that journey or to see themselves as possible alternatives to some of the, the challenges and solutions we have in place that aren't working for us today. So
it's definitely a scary road, but with leaders like you in the front line, I know those women definitely be in good hands.
I hope so. I'm really looking forward to meeting more people and to just, like I said, hearing more stories and finding ways to share more solutions and help solve any problems that might encounter us.
Well, don't
These are
worry. You're
trying
going to be meeting
times.
don't worry. You're going to be meeting a lot of those individuals here at Zaka.
I'm
And I
so
know our
excited.
listeners are very eager to get to those workshops with you and obviously getting to know you a little bit more in the work that you do in your community. Any last words for our listeners?
Last words, don't underestimate your identity. I also say this to many of my different clients is honor your heritage, but be the storyteller of your own life. We have to do both. We have to do both, not just one. In honoring our heritage, we're there. We show up for our global community. In being the storytellers of our own life, we honor ourselves. We have to do both.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for just taking this time out to just be with us and just kind of sharing in your journey. I love the fact that you have highlighted, which is something very important, being a student of life and never giving up in regards to your educational background. Like always take the opportunity to learn. The work that you do in the community is very impactful. I know it might be very tedious at times, and you might not feel supported at times the way you should be supported when it comes to making these decisions to help other individuals' lives be remarkable. But you're doing a wonderful job with it, and like I said, the University of Denver is very happy to have you, and I'm very excited to have you a part of the team here at Zaka.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you so much for your time.
And I just want to let the listeners know one last thing. If you want to hear more inspirational stories like Shahira, please check us out on ZakaConnect.com. Follow us on our social, Zaka Connect, and follow our feed, Zaka, wherever you listen to your podcasts.